afternoon, wherever you find folks are, and welcome to our Vivid User Group webinar. Today we will be discussing about quality application development with ALM Octane, and this webinar is brought to you by our great and famous Testing, Quality, and Application Lifecycle Management Special Interest Group, or for short TQAC, which is led by a few people, as you can see on the screen. Today, I will be your host. My name is Mihai Grigorescu. I'm the Accenture HP Alliance, Micro Focus Alliance Global Testing Lead. Sorry, folks, it's just still hard to move from HP to Micro Focus. I'm sure everybody has the same situation. I also happen to be the Chicago local user group leader, and I will be taking you through today's sessions and wonderful speakers that we have from Micro Focus. So today we have Vandan Nayak, who is a senior product manager with Micro Focus, and Ronan Asel, who is also a senior product manager with Micro Focus. I'm going to do a bit of introduction, and then we're going to do a bit of house cleaning for you. So Vandan has over 15 years of experience in the application lifecycle management and quality solutions. He started his career in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago with a company called Mercury Interactive as a technical consultant for Load Runner and Performance Center. He's led several teams of senior technical consultants and account managers who work for Fortune 1000 customers. And he has been focused on modernizing the ALM platform and delivering the next generation of ALM software for us globally in the past 5 years. Ronan is also a veteran in the testing in the industry, and he has a deep knowledge in Agile and scaled Agile methodologies. He's also a certified practitioner for SAFe, like that did any good to anybody. Sorry, Ronan, I had to say it. And he is also the program manager for ALM Octane and Agile Manager in the Lifecycle Management Group. So Vandan and Nayak will be taking us today through this presentation. And before we do a bit of house cleanup, I would like to remind you that this is a live session. However, it is being recorded. It will be made available to you in the Vivid calendar on the news and under the calendar. You will find the recording over there in a few days. And to enlarge the presentation screen, you must click on the rectangle on the top hand side of the main screen here on the presentation pane. Okay, and then a bit of how to manage these controls for this user interface. It's pretty simple. On the left hand side, you've got your chat. You will type in your questions at the bottom. And then you can obviously change your language and whatever else you need on the left hand side of the screen on the pane. Okay. If you have any questions, just type them in the question box and we will answer them for you. Now, the session will finish up. So towards the end of the session, you will receive a pop-up, which you will have to click on yes in order to receive screen sharing. Ronan will be doing a live demo on Octane. And you folks should obviously accept before you are able to see Ronan's screen. Now, again, if there's any questions, just feel free to ask us. We're here to answer you. We'll also have some poll questions coming through. And with that, without further ado, I would like to pass on the baton to Vandan and who can run the intro. So Vandan, all yours.
Hey, thanks, Mihai, for the great introduction. So let's go ahead and get started. And before we kind of get into the deep dive with ALM Octane, just wanted to give all of you folk some of the key trends that we are seeing here at Micro Focus from a product management standpoint. As you know, the former HPE, and now Micro Focus, we have been serving the enterprise customers for a really long time with our Agile and our test automation solutions. Now, some of the key trends that we'll talk about and how ALM Octane fits in there are the following. The first one is just the application delivery trend. This should be no surprise to anyone on this call that Agile has been now around for at least a decade or more, it is pretty much the de facto process methodology being adopted by development and QA teams in terms of building new applications. But in the enterprise domain, you still have a need to go about having multiple delivery processes, and that's where a hybrid delivery comes to fore. So we'll talk about that and how ALM Octane fits in there. Open source is, again, gaining significant ground, starting with small agile teams, now becoming pretty much, again, a standard in terms of just enterprise delivery. And how does ALM Octane fit that or meet that need? For this specific segment, we're talking quality. And the quality management in Agile has been, in our opinion, one of those areas which has been neglected overall, which is how do you go about driving intrinsic quality right from the planning level to having the multiple stages of the application build, and covering quality not just from a functionality standpoint, but also from a validation of security, from performance, and bringing in all the other various factors that drive quality. We'll talk about that. Again, the enterprise is the core of whom we serve. So the enterprise-ready platform in terms of having multiple capabilities, we'll cover some of those as to what ALM Octane has to offer. And Agile at scale, you would recollect what Mihai just mentioned. This is something that is shifting in terms of just the adoption and becoming more mainstream across the larger enterprise. So it's no longer about individual teams, but now it's about entire organizations who would like to operate at an agile scale. So this is kind of the core of what we'd cover. And with that, let's first get into our first polling question. So Mihai, if you could help us.
Yeah, it would help if I unmuted myself. Yes, thank you, Vandan. Great introduction as well from your side. Okay, so folks, time for the first polling question. So please submit your votes now. The polling question is the following. Have you ever heard of ALM Octane before? A, heard but not tried. B, evaluating currently or actively using it. C, plans to evaluate in the next 3 months. Or D, no plans as of now. And while you folks are capturing your responses, I would like to bring to your attention the fact that around January sometime, the TQA group will organize a hands-on workshop for the people that would like to try ALM Octane in one of our labs. And then we will give access to you to those versions of Octane so you can actually start playing around with them in a very interactive hands-on workshop. That session will happen again sometime in January. So just to dovetail into what Vandan and Ronan are showing you today. All right. So let's see. People, have you been voting? Let's see. Okay. Right. Okay, we'll give you 5 more seconds. I think we have enough responses so far. So let's see what the responses are looking like. Answer A, heard but not tried. We've got 12 people that voted for that. B, evaluating currently or actively using it, 14 people. Okay, that's great. Plans to evaluate in the next 3 months, 15 people. No plans as of now, 6 people. We hope to change those 6 people into plans to evaluate in the next 3 months, hopefully. So those are the numbers that we have, 12, 14, 15, and 6, Vanda. So back to you.
Great, thanks. And that I think for us is quite an even distribution in there. Definitely would like to cover some of the areas as to how ALM Octane is relevant and change some of those numbers in the favor of at least an evaluation in there. So let's go through the application delivery trends that I just talked about. This is a point that I don't want to belabor, but it's again very important. In enterprise application delivery projects, you have components where you can start off with an agile at the team level. It could be agile at scale. You need quality management to be built in, and you're looking at CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous deployment, as the direction in terms of just the delivery for those applications. A category called as Fluid IT, we look at ALM Octane as the product or the platform that is going to enable you to do that. And for the traditional lifecycle management, which has been very heavy waterfall-based approach, where you are dealing with mission-critical applications, you need high scalability, you need the strong workflow engine, reporting capability, and a rigid framework in terms of just managing some of the complexity. You have ALM and Quality Center that we've offered. Now, from a micro-focus standpoint, one of the key things that we want to make sure is both ALM and ALM Octane are just two sides of a coin, which means that as an existing customer of ALM or Quality Center, you actually are entitled to ALM Octane. What does that mean? It means that if you have an ALM instance available, say it's 12.55 or it's 12.53 or it's 12.21, we actually have the ability to do license sharing between ALM and ALM Octane Enterprise. If you have Quality Center, again, this license entitlement is being built and will be available early 2018 between Quality Center Enterprise and ALM Octane, what we call the Pro Edition. And if you are an existing Agile Manager customer, again, you have the ability to migrate from Agile Manager into ALM Octane Pro. So the one key thing, if you're an existing ALM Quality Center or Agile Manager customer that you need to be aware of, is that ALM Octane is available for you for free, and you can start using existing licenses of either of those three products and repurpose them towards ALM Octane. Now, what you see there at the bottom is on the purple chart is what we call CP5. Now, CP means Content Pack 5, and we released ALM Octane last June, and literally there's been release every month on SaaS. Every 3 months, we aggregate the same content, and we have an on-premise delivery, which means that we have an on-premise release every 3 months, and that is what we call a content pack. The upcoming release, which is due early December, is Content Pack 5. So it's the 5th release on-prem in the last year, over a year in there. And what you would see us shifting, again, from a business standpoint, is ALM and Quality Center have historically always had concurrent users. This is where the license sharing happens between concurrent users. But we also now have introduced the flexibility of having named user-based licenses. So looking at the shift in terms of just license consumption, we have some new licensing types that can be purchased if so desired. From an open source adoption standpoint, we know about some of the key shifts that have been happening. From an acceptance criteria or just from a framework trying to capture a requirement that also acts as a test, teams have embraced behavior-driven development, which is BDD. And Gherkin is one of the popular frameworks where you can go about now defining this requirement as a test also, so you don't really have to duplicate the effort. And in ALM Octane, starting day one, which is last year, we've supported that as what we call a Gherkin test. So native support for Gherkin is built into the product where you can define a given when-then scenario and actually run a manual runner-based execution to have validation of your user story or your feature. A module called Pipelines module that you will see later in the demo has built-in integrations into the CI server. So integrations into Jenkins, TeamCity, and Bamboo are provided out of the box. All these three plugins are actually available on GitHub. So all these adapters are open source. You can extend them if you choose to. We would definitely maintain them from a micro-focus standpoint. But the key is quality is now being defined by every application build, and we want to give you a view of quality right at the application build status. So CI integration is core to that strategy. Git as a source code management is, again, pretty much the open source leader in terms of how you would version assets. In ALM Octane, we have embedded Git to have the ability to capture manual tests and Gherkin tests, and you can actually version them. So you now have the ability to roll back on manual tests specifically, and you can go about now maintaining multiple versions and even check the history of the changes that you're making in there. From a test execution standpoint, again, extremely key. In ALM and Quality Center, we have had a long history of supporting primarily tools that came in from Mercury, which is QTP, Windrunner, and now UFT. with ALM Octane and a really very open and diverse ecosystem of test automation frameworks, we support all these automation frameworks that are supported pretty much by the CI server. So you have native ability to go about identifying tests that are triggered by the Selenium framework, and any reporting framework that uses the JUnit or the NUnit, we can actually show you reports and results of the same. The platform uses REST API. So again, no more OTA API, REST API that's published as a Swagger documentation, and you actually have a developer guide available if you need to build easy integrations into any other DevOps-based ecosystem. And from a ChatOps perspective, which is again one of the hottest trends in terms of just interacting with other systems, we have a proof of concept where you can go about now pulling in defect-related data from ALM Octane bot, as we call it. So the reason for the open source integration is it's key in terms of embracing open source, which we are doing not only, I'd say, at the test type level, but holistically across the platform by integrating them into the Octane platform. As I mentioned earlier, the quality management along with Agile project management has been an area that's been neglected. So it's been focused purely around Agile project management, which is where you would see most of the vendors offer their solutions. In Octane, we look at the lifecycle from an end-to-end perspective. So I talked about behavior-driven development already. So that is supported in ALM Octane. But one of the use cases that we offer is the ability to take that Gherkin-based requirement or the Gherkin-based test and push it to a developer IDE, which means that you can take that acceptance criteria, push it to a developer IDE, which could be Visual Studio, could be Eclipse, or could be IntelliJ. The developer could now go about automating that test using any automation framework, say, for example, Selenium, or they could use LeanFT or UFT Pro. They can check in the code into a CI, and now you pretty much created a DevOps-based automation flow, which is what was a manual test triggered manually each time now was automated and is checked in as part of the application build validation process in there. The quality from the CI and the pipeline integration is core in terms of just defining application build quality. And we have a configuration in the platform that allows you to map those tests to the user stories. So every time that you have a new build that is put out by the development team, you have a real-time visibility of the application quality. Acceptance criteria, again, a de facto in terms of just making sure that every sprint we cover and deliver the quality of our planned activities. In our Content Pack 5 release, what we have done is we've added a few more capabilities. So having the ability now to have attachments to manual test steps and enforcing the definition of done. So the definition of done, you would be aware, is one of the key ways of enforcing that at the end of the sprint, you have met the required criteria. In this specific release, which is the upcoming December release, you would see us enforce this. That means you cannot go about claiming that a build is ready unless you meet certain defined criteria. In our last release in August, we actually started supporting a UFT test standalone, which means you now have the ability to trigger standalone tests independent of the CI process itself. You have the ability to store these tests in a Git source code management tool and trigger these tests independent of the CI, which means similar to ALM and QC, you can go about defining a test suite and you can go executing that test suite as and when you need it. And we've also extended this beyond performance into load testing. One of our goals is to now publish more of an automation framework that's extensible, and you'll see us do that early next year, so that you can integrate many other automation frameworks and execute them also real time. DevSecOps and the notion of security is gaining much further ground, especially in terms of the early stages of validation. With our Fortify suite, we've actually created an integration where you can go about now identifying the issues and the vulnerabilities detected by Fortify and log them as defects in ALM Octane. And in fact, we look at integrations both with the Fortify SSC, which is the security center, or with Fortify On Demand, which is the SaaS offering, so that we can give you a much earlier view of security also in ALM Octane. And all of this information, which is quality not only from an acceptance criteria, from a functional aspect, from a performance aspect, from a security aspect, all of this is captured in what we call the application map. So it's a heat map in terms of the dashboard that we'll demo a little bit later to give you a sense of how quality is being redefined in an agile context. It's no longer about just running tests, which are black box tests at the very end of the iteration, but you want to have this information as early as possible so that you can take the remedial action that you require in terms of having a higher quality. With that, the enterprise-ready platform and the fact that we serve the enterprise is something that we've focused right from day one. With our Content Pack 5 release, one of the key things that we've added in addition to the Linux installer is a Windows installer. So again, as ALM QC customers, we've seen about 80 to 85% of them have ALM QC installed on a Windows server. So this would be a key for those enterprise customers who are looking to install them on Windows. We've actually added support for OData-based REST API. So there's a framework for OData 2.0 that we support, and I'll walk through some screenshots later to say as to how now the REST API can actually plug into solutions like Tableau and Power BI, or even you could use Excel to get an OData kind of feed of data from Octane and go about creating custom reports. Synchronizing to ALM QC is what we offered in August release, and now we are offering synchronizing to Jira. And this is also available for free, which means that if you have Jira, and that is the tool of choice primarily from an Agile project management perspective, we look at integrating with Jira and having the ability to give you an end-to-end traceability right from the planning to the quality phases of the application. Our rules engine is something that is server-side. So if you haven't had a chance to look at ALM Octane, the one thing you realize is the workflow no longer is on the client side. It's all on the server side, executed through a rules engine. And we keep adding and enhancing that rules engine. The permissions and the user roles are also enhanced. We also just recently added support for single sign-on on SaaS instances. So if you are an existing SaaS customer and you would like to integrate ALM Octane to your identity management solutions, we now have added support for that. Audit history, traceability, again, key enterprise aspects in terms of just tracking, having the traceability and the reporting capability, something that we go in ground up with. And Elasticsearch is an open source component that we have embedded into the platform. Elasticsearch allows us to search through all the aspects, the texts, the comments, the ability to go about identifying similar defects, the ability to identify similar requirements for similar tests, just by searching through Elastic has helped immensely in terms of just driving collaboration between multiple teams in our portfolio. And we also leverage some of the open source plugins that Elastic provides in terms of the dashboard reporting capabilities. So again, embracing open source, making it part of our platform is a core shift that we've had. And from a productivity standpoint, we know that DevOps is all about culture, about collaboration. Collaboration here, primarily, we start off with having native integrations into Slack. We are looking at Skype and MS Teams in the future. And the IDE plugins, as I mentioned, we've added Visual Studio as well to it. So giving the enterprise the end-to-end capabilities of governance, of the ability to have frameworks and customization, and manage multiple projects at scale is what Octane is meant to do right from day one. Now let's just walk through some of the new capabilities that I covered. So from an OData standpoint, as I mentioned, we support OData 2.0, and you can simply connect to an OData feed either through Excel, through Tableau, or Power BI. And this is, again, available or will be available in the December release. We've added support for custom environments. So there's a top right drop-down where you can now add additional environments in addition to the default, which is the dev, production, QA, and the staging. So this helps as mainly filtering and tracking all the activities that you're managing, both from a planning standpoint and also from a testing standpoint. So the ability to filter, the ability to report based on custom environments that you have defined now gives you the ability to have much granular reporting capabilities. From a workspace standpoint, and a workspace is a construct which is similar to an ALM QC project. So this workspace now could be in an Agile terms of program or in an ALM QC terms of project. And we look at now the ability to include shared space. Now, shared space is a new architectural concept that we spent a lot of time and effort in terms of building over the past release. And this shared space is now the common area that allows us to share entities between multiple projects. So Ronan will go into this a little bit deeper as we talk about shared workspace. But the key differentiator between ALM and QC has always been the ability of cross-project reporting and cross-project of asset sharing. This is something that we carry on with ALM Octane. However, from an architectural standpoint, it's much, much easier for us to share assets of tests, defects, requirements. And this is where you would see us coming out with the benefits of shared workspace. And as I mentioned, Windows Installer, a key ask from many of our enterprise customers to ensure that we go about having support for, I would say, IT policies which have been validated with Windows. They wanted this as the primary delivery mechanism in there. In addition to our existing synchronizer, as I mentioned, the Jira synchronizer is available as well. So from a SaaS standpoint, we expect the SaaS release to be available as a GA release next week. And on-prem, it will come out in the first week of December. You can now go about having the synchronizing between Jira from a planning aspect into ALM Octane seamlessly. Again, just to emphasize, it's free of charge out of the box as a part of the product itself. And from a developer standpoint, as many of you may have, I would say, Visual Studio or Microsoft-based development environments, you would see us now covering the 3 plugins that we typically offer with Visual Studio. So the ability to track all the developer-related activities, which is the defects, the user stories, and actually be able to tag them to the lines of code that are being written, build in the native traceability that enterprises desire to see as to how does the quality and how is the team performing in terms of delivering these application requirements. So that kind of gives you an overview of where we stand from primarily a high-level quality, a platform, and an enterprise readiness. One of the key shifts happening for us is Agile at scale. And here I'll invite my colleague, Ronan Aseo, to talk about Agile and Agile at scale. So, Ronan.
Thank you, Vandan, and thank you, Mihai, for the introduction. We've done in the past releases quite a lot in supporting the notion of Agile and scale, and what does Agile at scale mean for us? We realize that our customers, most of our customers, are in type of a transformation phase where Agile is being adopted in pockets in the organization, while traditional methods are still being practiced for several projects. So really, when we came up with Octane, we really wanted to be able to provide a tool that will help the transformation, the Agile transformation that is happening within the enterprise. And I think before we start, it will be interesting for us to know what is happening within your own organization. So this is the second polling question that we would appreciate your feedback. Mihai, can you please initiate that one?
Yeah, sure. So, folks, time for polling question number 2. The questions are the following. What Agile project management methodology do you practice? And I would add, if any. So, option number A, Scrum. Option B, Kanban. Option C, Enterprise Agile Frameworks, SAFe, LESS, that, or other. Option D, Hybrid, Waterfall with Agile, also known as Scrumfall in some environments. No Agile, only Waterfall as the last option. So let's see. This is particularly interesting for me, Ronan, as well, because I see a lot of people claiming to be Agile when they're actually not. And that was my snarky remark at your certification. I've seen a lot of certified people that are actually not delivering work in an Agile fashion. that's not to undermine the importance of having a certification. That was just a jab at your own. So let's see what the people are saying now. So far, okay, I think the polling is done. So far we've got 9 people that have voted Scrum, 2 people that have voted Kanban, interesting, 4 people that have voted Enterprise Agile frameworks like SAFe, Less That, and other, 22 people that have voted Hybrid Waterfall with Agile, and only 5 people that have voted Waterfall only, or V-model or whatever. So those are your answers, Ronen.
Thank you, Michai. I think these are very interesting results. I think they're actually pretty much aligned with what we see when we do our own surveys, both for internal customers and also what you see in the analyst reports. Agile is there. Agile is actually not that new. It's already a decade since the Agile Manifesto. But in terms of penetrating in the enterprises, it takes time. It takes time to adjust, and most of the enterprises are in a transition mode where hybrid approaches are implemented, whether it's Water Scrum Fall or Waterfall Scrum or whatever it's called. And Michai can probably tell you a lot about the certification that is required to practice those. And this is really the approach that we wanted to take with Octane, really to provide the ability with the modern planning and test management tool that will align with practicing hybrid project management methodologies and custom Agile project management capabilities within the organization. So in terms of Agile and planning, these are the areas of focus, and I will highlight the ones that we recently updated in CP5. So we now have a requirement, or some may call it a business definition model. We can actually define free-form requirements in a word editing-like mode, and you can structure almost unlimited hierarchies, embed pictures, embed links, and so forth within those requirements, and trace them into tests and defects. So if you're practicing, if you just want to create requirements and later on check their traceability and validate their tests without even practicing Agile, you can do that today in Octane without even using the backlog. In the future, what we plan to is to be able to convert these requirements to features. So once you're doing Water Scrum Fall approaches, where there might be an intense specification process in the beginning, and later these requirements are executed in features or in user stories, you can convert them into backlog items. One of the things that I like to mention, and Vandan mentioned it in his intro, is that it's part of the enterprise readiness features. The business rules and the workflows, they work on all the entities in the system. So also for requirements, if you need to pass them through an approval process, you can create workflow within Octane to define that workflow of approval and the various phases the requirements go through until they are approved. In terms of methodology support, so Scrum is really the dominant framework out there. What we see is that usually organizations start with Scrum because of its ceremonies and practices, and later on, as they are more mature in their Agile adoption, they may try out Kanban. So in Scrum, we now support, I think, all the metrics and ceremonies, including a retrospective and scope change reports, which we recently added in CP5. We also implemented the release forecast graph that is basically providing you with an estimation based on your current velocity, average velocity, on whether you will meet the release date with the current scope. For those of you familiar with Agile Manager, it's pretty much the same functionality there. For Kanban support, aside from a storyboard that we already had, now we are introducing support for Kanban metrics for WIP and cycle time limits, and these are supported with a control chart graph that allows you to track your Kanban execution. Octane is built to support multiple methodologies, but it's very much aligned with the scaled Agile framework. We'll talk about it a bit later, but for now, what you can do for SAFE is really create those PIs, program increments, create milestones within those PIs for your deliverables. You can prioritize items with the weighted shortest job first priorities, and you can actually track the feature lifecycle within the feature board that we have, again, fully configurable to align with the various stages or phases that your organization is utilizing. In the future, this support will be enhanced also to support what is called solution layer in SAFE 4.5, for those of you who are familiar with the framework. Vandan mentioned the definition of done, and we take it very seriously as quality is everywhere, and quality is our strength. So we now implemented business rules which allows you to create what is a done state for a user story or a feature. Can a user story be done if there are defects open associated with that user story? Can a feature be done if there are tests related to that feature which have not run or have not passed? So you can create business rules that actually allows you to enforce a definition of done of policy across your program and across multiple programs now with our shared space support. In terms of backlog migration, if you are moving from other tools, we do support the ability to import from Excel. So you can export from the tool that you're currently using, your backlog, to Excel or a CSV file and import that into Octane and start working with Octane with your own data. Customers or Agile Manager customers, for customers or Agile Manager customers, we have a migration utility that actually takes an Agile Manager project or a workspace actually and converts it to an Octane workspace. So that's available as well. Like I mentioned in the beginning, for us, Agile at scale means a lot of things. It's not just Agile, it's hybrid. It's support for more traditional approaches like waterfall and embedding them within an Agile processes. The platform is configured so it can support multiple methodologies, and we are constantly updating that so it can be customized. In the current release, we are allowing customers or admins to customize the labels of fields. So if epics means something different to what we thought epics means for you, you can call them something else. And the same goes to lists that come out of the box. So you can actually customize the product to align with your methodology. In the future, what we plan is to enhance that functionality and actually come out with methodology templates that you can choose from, and the product will be aligned with that methodology. DevOps is part of practicing Agile at scale. The pipeline model that we have and our openness to connect with CI systems like TeamCity, Jenkins, Bamboo, and also extensibility with our Agile, with our CI SDK allows us to bring data that comes from these tools back into the product and provide full traceability on automated tests and readiness of the build for deployment in production. And REST API, again, Vandan mentioned that from day one, we wanted to be open. So all our entities, as part of their definition of done, is the ability to connect via REST APIs that are publicly available, and the documentation is also available within the product via Swagger Online Help. So I now drill down a bit into what we recently introduced in CP5, scope change report, a report that shows the team what was planned in a sprint versus what was actually delivered and what happened during that sprint. So this is a very useful tool, especially for those of you practicing Scrum and doing retrospectives. So once you freeze the content of a sprint, we track what was changed, items that were splitted, descoped, added, and at the end of the sprint, when you do retrospective, you can identify how well did you plan, and take that information with you as you plan the next sprint, the coming sprint ahead. In terms of tracking team velocity, we now have a team velocity chart, again, very similar to the one that we had in Agile Manager, that allows you to look at your planned velocity for the team versus the actual velocity of a team, multiple teams, all the teams, and this allows you to modify it every sprint as you do your planning, and also to look at that historical information as you plan your next release. There was a question in the forum whether this is available at a higher level, the cross workspace level. Currently, that is not available, but it's something that we are looking at for in the roadmap. Release forecasting shows you how well are you doing and what is the expected date for the release with the current scope. So basically, we track the average velocity of the teams and how much they accomplished in story points per day, and we provide an estimate on when do we think that the content will be delivered. This is a graph that we foresee release managers, product owner to be tracking on a daily basis once the release is well in the way, and allows you to understand, are you on time? Maybe you should revisit your resource allocation or the scope with this data. In the future, this graph will be enhanced with additional configuration capabilities. Definition of done, I mentioned it before, the ability to configure business rules or workflows that control the status of the phases and the prerequisites to move from one phase of an item to the other based on the readiness of the item in terms of tasks, in terms of tests, and in terms of defects associated with it. Cycle time basically measures the time spent in every phase of the item. This is particularly important in Kanban, as you really want to optimize your flows and you want to understand where you have bottlenecks on when item is stale for too long. So you can configure your cycle time limits and also your work in progress limits, and the system will notify you and will alert you if you're exceeding that, and that will allow the team to look where is the bottleneck, and maybe they should not pull new items into the funnel until items that are in progress are done. Control chart basically shows you the cycle time over time of the items completed. Crossway, the shared space notion, this is part of our Octane Enterprise Edition, was introduced in the previous release and we are enhancing it. And here is where you create your shared customization that spans across workspaces, whether that's UDFs, whether it's workflow. And here you will also create entities that you want to manage across workspaces. So in CP5, the first entity that we are supported is the ability to create releases that span workspaces, and that will actually allow you to do cross-project or cross-program reporting with that notion. In the future, we will enhance that with additional entities like defects, like features that will be able to span across workspaces with that capability. We have, I think for already 6 months now, integration available with PPM. Micro Focus PPM are also investing heavily in Enterprise Agile and now have the notions of epics and epics management. And the current integration with Octane allows you to synchronize data between PPM and Octane, create portfolio epics in PPM, and these will propagate into Octane once these are approved in PPM. And this actually enhances the current integration that also collects timesheet data, collects backlog item data, and so forth to be aggregated at the portfolio tool. I'll skip that slide because we don't have much time. And this is for you, Mihai. In terms of the alignment to SAFe, So ALM Octane Pro is pretty much aligned with the program level with Safe Essentials that was declared in Safe 4.5. As you go into the large solution level and you manage large solutions, you would probably need ALM Octane Enterprise that will allow you to manage those large epics or features or capabilities that span across programs. And we see Micro Focus PPM as the portfolio level planning for Agile. And again, there's a tight integration between the two products, and this integration is being enhanced as more features are being introduced in both tools. So I'll now go into a very short demo because we are running a bit of time, and the demo should actually pop up in a different tab for you guys. So I hope you will be able to see my screen. All right, so I got indication that the screen is shared. So this is ALM Octane. We noticed in the poll that some of you are still not seeing the product. There's a lot of movies out there available that you can actually go and drill down on the product with various scenarios. I'll go very briefly on what is was recently introduced. So as you can see, the main modules are requirements. Requirements is where you would manage your requirements in free format mode, would author them, link tests to them, create them as you do your specification. Backlog is where you would manage your program backlog. The backlog is structured in epics, features, and user stories. As I mentioned earlier, you can import backlog items from Excel in order to move data from other tools or data that you managed in Excel previously. The team backlog is where the team will work, and it's focused on the team metrics and the team's ceremonies. A quality model is where you would manage your overall application health. We have the notion of application models that you can create and track your overall application health as you continue to add features into the product. This is where you also be able to add tests, and actually tests can be added anywhere in the product. So you can see tests appearing everywhere. You can create tests that are covering stories, tests that are covering features, and these tests can be manual tests. There can be gherkin tests if you are practicing BDD, and there could be automated tests that are coming from the CI. And the pipeline models is where you would track your CI, you would track the health of your build, you will do test failure analysis, and so forth. In today's demo, I just want to focus on the features that we added for Enterprise Agile, or I would say Agile at scale. So one of the things that we have in ALM Octane Enterprise is the notion of a shared space. So I'm now in my tenant, and you can see this is the shared space, and underneath there are multiple workspaces that are defined as part of these clusters of workspaces. The thing is that any customization that I'm doing at the shared space level, for example, right now I'm looking at the entity defect with its workflow. So any customization that I will do here will actually propagate, and this will be the defect workflow for all the workspaces underneath. So that allows you to enforce policy across your organization. One thing that we have added, and this is part of our shared entities agenda, is the ability to create releases at that level. So I now created a cross-workspace release that actually would be created on any workspace that is underneath that shared space. Again, in the future, there would be additional entities that can be shared. Now, what can I do with this cross-workspace release? As I go into the dashboard is typically for items that are in a particular workspace. This one is for an Advantage online shopping application, which you're probably familiar with as an ALM customer. So here I would see typically things that are coming from this workspace. But once you're using ALM Octane, you can actually track things across workspaces. So let's say I want to track the progress of my features in a solution that spans across workspaces. So let's take that graph, add it to the dashboard, by default, it will be part of this workspace, but I can configure the scope to come from multiple workspaces. So I'm going to select all the workspaces that I have on my tenant, and I can select a release that is shared, that is relevant to all workspaces. Once I do that, basically I created a graph that brings data from all the workspaces, from all features across workspaces related to that release. Another graph that you can see over here, it's a graph that I pre-created, is a release criteria. So I have a release criteria across my organization for no critical and no high defect. This graph is applicable to multiple workspaces. So I actually created it for all my workspaces, and in a single dashboard, I can track the release criteria, my health of all my workspace, my programs that I'm developing, and also the feature status of all those workspaces. So this is really a glimpse, but you can do a lot with just this functionality, and this will be enhanced as more entities are shared. So we now go back to the demo, to the slides. So I'll turn it back to Vandan. It's actually to Mihai for the last polling question.
Great. And great presentation, Ronan. I would like to re-emphasize the fact that we will have a hands-on workshop in January. So for whoever wants to play around and fiddle with what you just showed now on your screen, then you guys are more than welcome to join through, and we will give you access to an instance of Octane. Right, now for the last question, for the last polling question, do you have plans for continuous delivery? Quick answer A, no. Wait a second, I have two different boxes here. Answer A, no continuous integration, CI or CD practices currently. Option B, happy with CI but no plans with CD. Option C, evaluating release automation tools to build CD processes. Option D, already do continuous delivery with release automation tools. And last option, option E, shift to cloud platform as a service, Amazon, Azure, or others. So let's hear it from you folks. There's a ton of questions in the question box, Vandan and Ronan. So I suggest that after this we tackle them because we need to answer lots and lots and lots of questions. Okay, so the answers are the following. No CI or CD practices currently. 8 people have voted for that. Happy with CI but no plans with CD. 6 people. Evaluating release automation tools to build CD processes. 7 people. Already do continuous delivery with release automation tools. 6 people. Another 3 with shift to cloud platform as a service. Okay, those are the answers.
So I'd agree. I'd say let's switch to the Q&A directly. And
right. So I'll pick up a handful of these. Right. You mentioned migration from ALM to Octane. So do you have a migration utility to move data from ALM or QC to Octane?
So that's a great question. There is a migration utility that's in the works currently. And if you're interested, I do reach out to me, Vandan Nag, so vnag@microfocus.com, and we can get you connected. It's still in the proof of concept stage, but I think it's good enough so that we can start doing trials of migrating ALM quality center data into ALM Octane-based projects.
And with that, would you be able to also import QC workflows into Octane?
At the moment, the workflows cannot be imported, so that's a good question as well. The workflows that are built in ALM Octane are through the rules engine. We are looking at having in the future more of a software development kit, an SDK, to go about having a framework to automate that. But as of now, we cannot migrate workflows specifically.
All right. The next question is from Michelle asking that she was told to have ALM 1255 in order to use ALM Octane for free. Is that correct?
So you need to have ALM 12.x version. You don't need 12.5.5 specifically. The license sharing that we talked about is actually available from 12.2, 12.53, and 12.55. So all these three releases that I just mentioned have built in, or they have a patch or a hotfix capability to do license sharing.
Great. Then the obvious question for the Apple users out there, does ALM Octane work on a Mac?
Absolutely. So one of the key design criteria was to make it browser agnostic, given ALM QC being only limited to IE. You can use it on Safari, Chrome, Firefox, on a Mac, on Windows, and obviously on IE.
And with that, what about localization?
That's another good question. So right now, in our August release, we support 4 additional languages: Japanese, I believe Chinese, Spanish, in addition to English, and we'll add a few more. And the need for a larger enterprise, which has globally distributed teams, it's much easier to just change the language from a drop-down, like on the top right of the screen, to enable now the labels in the new language. So localization is much, much easier compared to ALM and QC, where earlier we had to install software packs to do that.
All right. So then you're saying that each and every workspace can run in its own language?
You can have, the language will be English by default, but you can localize it. So when you access it, the data would be in the same language that we would put in, which is going to be whatever I would say the persona puts data in. However, the labels and the associated fields would get localized.
All right. So, for instance, you would have your description of your user story in Japanese, but the user story will still be called user story in plain English, right?
Correct. So this is though, because it's client side, so it's only on the user. We don't really change it on the database for the workspace itself.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Okay, we got one. Let's take 2 more questions quickly. Okay, here's an interesting question from Mark. I love that question. Question for Ronan. Octane seems to overlap a lot with Jira. Hint, hint, and wink, wink, yes. We already have Jira for backlog and stories, but we need an automated manual testing solution. What is your best option for something from Micro Focus that integrates with Jira?
So it's a good question there. We actually believe that we have a stronger offering with Jira with all the stuff that we provide out of the box without the necessary add-ons and so forth. In terms of if teams still prefer to use Jira, although the richness of our offering, there are 2 options there. We have out-of-the-box Jira Sync, so you can actually work in Jira and synchronize your items into ALM Octane and create your manual test, automated test within Octane and do full traceability in Octane. That's one option coming in CP5 and the Jira Sync. Another option, like I mentioned, is a one-time import where you export the items from Jira and you import them into Octane and you start working in Octane.
Great. And last question, and I'm sorry for the folks that we haven't addressed your question, we haven't addressed your questions. We will hopefully have a Word document with all the questions answered. But the question that I would like to address here is something close and dear to my heart. Is Octane, is it a client file dependent like ALM client? So do you still need to install an ActiveX component in order to run Octane?
Yep. So no client at all, no ActiveX at all, completely browser agnostic. So Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Safari, you should be able to use it on a Mac, on Windows. So there's no download component of any kind at all. So that's the great news.
Great stuff. All right, so I think we are done, and especially given the time that we have allotted to us. Any closing remarks, Vandan and Ronan?
So from my side, thank you again all for attending, and great hosting me. Hi from you. So hopefully this was beneficial, and we'll definitely respond to all the questions that were asked.
For Great stuff. Well, folks, thank you for joining. I believe that we are now at the end of the session. So again, big thank you from our group, from Vivid, for joining us and spending the time with us. You will find the recording of the session on the website. So until we meet again, hopefully in January, when you have your hands on, for the US based people, happy Thanksgiving. For the rest of the people, well, happy holidays and enjoy the rest of your week. Goodbye.
The